the topic of resilience. We are resilient and adapt when technological difficulties might occur, but hopefully you can see everything okay and you can hear me well as well. So to provide a little information about me and why I would be here talking to you about personal resilience, my degree is in industrial organizational psychology. And I attended Stetson University for my undergraduate and majored in psychology and English. And then from there, I went to Florida Institute of Technology for my master's and PhD in IO psychology. And then after that, I did a postdoctoral fellowship at Clemson University, where I was an embedded scholar, where what that means is that even though I was a Clemson employee, my actual physical work location was Prisma Health in Greenville, South Carolina. And throughout these different educational experiences, I had a lot of interest in research and applied work, looking at what makes an employee or a team or a leader resilient, and what do we need to do to make sure that we're protecting the well-being of the people in the workplace. So I had some experience working with military populations as well as healthcare. And recently in my position now, I'm an assistant professor at Embry-Riddle, and I work with disaster scholars, and we're interested in looking at the different kinds of things that might influence how people prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. And I take a perspective of the employees and the individuals who are the ones actually responding to those disasters, and what can we do to make sure that they feel like they are able to put their best foot forward on the job and also stay healthy and stay resilient to any kinds of adversity that they might face. So what I'm going to go over today is a model of resilience that I call the complex adaptive systems approach. And really what this means is that if you think of a person or a team or a classroom, anything like that as a system, you can understand the factors that either promote or prevent or harm resilience. And there are some foundations, I call them the behavioral building blocks, that I'll go over to show you a little bit more detail about what that actually means for you, and then have embedded within that some tools and techniques. I really want this to be something that you can take something away and apply it right away into better understanding what resilience means for you and how you can develop that capacity over time. So the first thing I like to start with is, what even is the thing we're talking about? So when we're thinking about what is personal resilience, then I like to start with, well, how do we define it? And there have been a lot of different definitions over time. There are some definitions that really focus on positively adapting when something bad happens. Or even beyond just adapting to it, you actually might experience growth or positive changes after having faced something that was troubling or even traumatic. Other definitions have focused on the after effects. So it's like, once something has happened, can you bounce back? Can you regain a sense of performance, or can you operate the way that you were after something has happened? And then, over time, the more definitions come in, and there's this idea that it's a process. It's not just like, can you be resilient or did you demonstrate resilience, but it's actually the process of adapting when a situation is challenging. And I think we can kind of bring this all together. What is a definition that really encompasses the things that I think of when I think of resilience? It is that process approach, but it also involves kind of three main things. Once you consider the fact that adversity is a core piece of any definition of resilience, there are then the things that can help you be resilient, the promoting factors. There are things that you can do to actually engage in resilience once adversity strikes. So I call those the enactment or strategies of the mechanisms that you use to engage in resilience. And then finally is, was there resilience in the end? And that's the idea of, have you actually demonstrated it? So the three things have, what are the things that promote it? How do you actually engage in it? And then did you demonstrate it in the end? And so I also kind of like to start with the end and the beginning. So if I am able to impart any sort of knowledge at all, the takeaways I'd like you to have are essentially that any system has factors that can either make it better or make it worse, that can promote or reduce what I like to call optimal functioning, or kind of being your best self. For people, if we think about personal resilience, there are resources and there are stressors, and those are the specific things when we talk about factors that promote or reduce functioning. And then finally, it can really help you to just understand what this looks like for you, and be able to have an additional sense of self-awareness that can then help you when you do face something that's troubling, stressful, or challenging. And so when it comes to this complex adaptive systems approach, you kind of think about it as input, process, and output. And I saw some computer science people in the chat and in our participant group for today. And so this might be something, it's kind of like an engineering approach. You might be familiar with it in computer science. And so what this really means is that we have different things that we use. So this could be information, this could be like physical materials, our own energy. And we use those to do things. That could be to, organize your desk. It could be to conduct a research study. It could be to study for a test. And then we have kind of the output of that, like what happens as a result of us using those inputs and engaging in those processes. And that ends up looking like something, how did you perform on the test? Or did you learn something new? Was there a change in your skills? And this can kind of go on, and any person, any team, a class, a school can go through this as a complex adaptive system. And when it comes to understanding resilience, the first step is really understanding what is the system that we're looking at. So what are the things that you use to do the things that you do, and how does it look like when you are kind of at your best or performing optimally? And so the challenge with performing optimally is that at any point there could be something that disrupts the system. Something could come in and reduce the input that you're used to having. Something that could come in and disrupt the processes you're used to engaging in, or something could come in and interrupt your ability to learn from something that you've been doing. There are a lot of different things that can happen, but this is kind of the idea of adversity comes into play when it disrupts the system. So I also like to think of, what are the things that help us be resilient? If we think of ourselves, as a student or a leader or a member of an organization, as a system, there are three main types of resources that we can use. The first resource is that helps you to sustain system functioning. So if you think of if your system is you as a student, it might be the resources that help you to just kind of go about your day. And this could be, getting sufficient sleep. This could be the kind of diet that you have, physical activity, things that give you energy. The second type of resource is the kind that decreases your susceptibility to disruption. So just because adversity strikes doesn't mean you necessarily have to be disrupted. A lot of times there are resources that can help you to have a buffer. So even if some kind of adversity happens, maybe you have some sort of, in a systems term, redundancy that would allow you to kind of keep going and not even really feel disruption when adversity strikes. The final type is the resource that allows you to bounce back. And so this is when adversity has happened and your system is somehow disrupted. What are the things that you need to get you back to performing optimally or to functioning in a way that makes you feel happy and satisfied with the way things are going? And so if you think about developing your own kind of personal resilience toolkit, a really important question to ask is, what do these resources look like for you? So putting this together, thinking about, well, what does resilience even look like? What are these different components of it, and how do they work together in any kind of situation? So I like this graph, and it shows you kind of over time, if you have some sort of outcome in mind, what does resilience look like? And if we think of, level of outcome variable, it might be something like your performance in school. And so over time, when adversity strikes, what does it look like? So the first thing would be, there's individuals or there's a team or something like that that are kind of performing at some level. And at some point, they experience some sort of adversity. Initially, you might also experience some kind of negative reaction or disruption, so that performance goes down a little bit. But then you start to enact what we call resilience mechanisms, and you draw upon your resources, and then through coping, we're able to kind of regain that performance. And then over time, you're able to demonstrate resilience in the form of sustaining performance despite having been disrupted. And that's how it's really important to think about, well, what is that outcome? What is the thing that you want to be looking at to be able to tell whether or not you've been able to be resilient? And so we'll kind of take that idea. Basically, once we have a shared understanding of what resilience is and how it works, the next step is figuring out how that works for you and what you can do to build that for yourself. And so kind of the key point here is that one of the features of adversity is that it's unexpected, it's unpredictable, and you can't always prepare for it ahead of time. And so instead of worrying about how, what can we do about specific types of adversity, sometimes it might be more helpful to think of, well, what can I build up my capacity for resilience? And that way, when I have to use it, it might be less draining for me. So I think of there being kind of three main building blocks. The first is resilient behavior, and then resilient cognition or thoughts, emotions, and then resilient connection, which is more of the social interactions that we have. And to better demonstrate this and kind of what this means in a very specific technique that you can use to help build your resilience, I have this 2-minute video from an organization called HeartMath, and they have a system of heart rate variability biofeedback. And so they have these tools that essentially measure your heart rate and show it back to you real time. And they have this technique that's a breathing technique that through the connection that there is between your respiratory system and your autonomic nervous system, or like the fight or flight response, you can actually influence your heart rate by using the breathing technique. And with their device, you can actually see that happening real time. So you can actually engage in a breathing technique and see that change. And this ends up being a very specific type of resilient strategy because it improves your physiological resilience to stress. So when stressful things happen, if you practice the breathing technique over time, you'll actually be able to calm your physical system back out of the sympathetic arousal or the fight or flight and back into kind of homeostasis. So we will do some troubleshooting if the audio doesn't come through. But I'm going to go ahead and play this so that we can see what this technique looks like.
Quick coherence is a simple yet powerful technique that you can use to connect more deeply with your own heart and to connect more with the hearts of others. Let's try it together. First step is to focus your attention on the area of your heart. Just shift your focus to the area of your chest or heart and pretend like your breath is flowing in through the area of the heart or chest and out through the area of the heart. Breathe a little more slowly, a little more deeply than you normally do, maybe to a count of 5 in and 5 out, but find a smooth, easy rhythm. Let's do it. Now continue this heart-focused breathing and make a sincere attempt to re-experience a positive or regenerative feeling, like the care or appreciation you have for someone or something in your life. It could be a pet, a time in nature, a special place, an accomplishment. But feel that genuine feeling of love you have for someone, of care or appreciation. Or just focus on a feeling of calm and ease as you continue the heart-focused breathing. Now this technique, quick coherence, is putting your heart rhythms into a more coherent mode, a coherent rhythm, and it has a carryover effect. So as you move into your next activities or connect with someone, you can feel more heart connected, more centered. You can do this simple 1-minute technique anytime, anywhere.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a double check right now to make sure that we have, okay. I'm like checking to make sure we don't have any chat things coming up for me. But so you know, if you're a science kind of person like me, you might see that video and think like, okay, yeah, sure, it's nice to breathe deeply for a minute, but like, isn't that kind of fluffy? Is there really any efficacy to that type of intervention? And so there is a lot more science to it. I like that video because it's short and sweet and gives you a little window into what it looks like, but I'd be happy to share more resources on the ways that heart rate variability has been demonstrated to help improve physiological resilience to stress. And so that's, you know, a very clear example of the first building block, which is behavior that we can exhibit to build our capacity for resilience. And so the first kind of area of this, there's sort of 3 domains here, is energy management. And that means improving our physical and psychological stress tolerance. It's kind of the idea of that heart rate variability. The same things might approach you, the same things might happen, but you might not feel as stressed out by that. There's also this idea of actually being able to acquire more resources that can help you handle your stress and reduce the chance that when you face adversity, there's truly disruption in your system. And finally, there's a term that I'm sure many of you have heard before, which is coping. And if you are able to do so, coping allows you to actually influence the stressor or the adversity, try to problem solve or make that go away, as well as allow you to feel better or kind of engage in some thinking about, you know, how might I think about this differently if you can't necessarily change it. So the second building block is more of a cognitive type of domain. So these are the thoughts and emotions that might help you to build that capacity for personal resilience. The first one is self-awareness. And this involves examining your own patterns of thought, of behavior, and thinking about ways that you can be curious and open to the situation around you. And what's important here is that you're thinking about, from even an energy management perspective, kind of what energy do you bring? how does it influence others? How does the energy of others influence you? And what can you learn from that? Emotion regulation can come in handy once you have sort of a sense of self-awareness. And this typically involves two distinct types. There is suppression and reappraisal as the main types of emotion regulation, and these are separate from this idea of genuine expression. And so emotion regulation can be a way to handle a situation that's stressful. Suppression is also known as surface acting, which means that you kind of just, put the emotion aside, or you kind of try to suppress how you're feeling, versus reappraisal, which is also known as deep acting, and that involves really thinking differently about the situation and trying to feel the emotion that you want to feel. And then the final one there would be genuine expression, which is just kind of feeling, expressing things as they come. And each of these can be something that's trained, you can practice it, and you can be strategic about how and when you want to use your emotions, because it can be stressful to do these and it can require some level of competence, but it can help you to better adapt to or respond to different situations. And finally, there's some recent research that talks about this idea of a resilient mindset and kind of reflecting on your relationship with stress or your relationship with adversity. What does it mean to you to experience something like that? So there's this idea that some people, when they feel stressed or they experience adversity, they think of that as a learning experience or an opportunity to grow and develop. And that has been shown to actually be positively related to resilient outcomes. So if you think, I can handle this, it's a challenge, I can overcome this, and I can learn from it, then you actually might be more likely to do those things. It's obviously not applicable in every situation, because there are some situations that you truly don't have the ability to just overcome, depends on what it is. But for the kinds of things that you do have some sort of agency or control over, it's helpful to try and reframe the way you think about what stress means to you. There's something that is really important to me when it comes to thinking about resilience and stress, and that is the role that anxiety plays, or worry or fear or stress, the feeling of being stressed plays. And there's this theory called the perseverative cognition theory of stress, which basically says that when we are exposed to stressful situations, we think about them a lot, and we are really concerned with figuring out, what's going on, how does it affect me, are my goals being blocked, and what can I do about it? And there's an important piece of perseverative cognition is that it's our default response to experiencing something stressful. And that means that it's a natural and normal experience. It means that your fight or flight, your autonomous nervous system is working appropriately and correctly and keeping you safe. If you are at some point feeling anxiety or worry, or you're ruminating about stressful things that happen. And so I put this picture of my dog up here because I like to think about it a little bit from this perspective of our bodies are trying their best to keep us safe. And that's why we are worried about things. It's because we want to make sure that we are aware of the situation and able to handle anything that comes. And so my dog, anytime there is a knock at the door, someone rings the doorbell, he like loses his mind, is just barking like crazy. I mean, he almost never makes this sound otherwise, but in these situations, he sounds like a wolf or something. And I go up to him and I tell him like, thank you, Finn, like, thank you for protecting us, and I've got it from here. And it's this sort of idea that, he is doing his job of protecting me, even when it's not necessarily a situation that, I feel like I need protection. It's, just someone delivering a package or whatever it might be. But I also know that, like this is him doing something to protect me and keep me safe. And our bodies are doing the same kind of thing when we start to feel anxious or worried or fearful about a situation that we're experiencing. And the kind of issue is that if we experience this a really long amount of time, so they call it prolonged disinhibition, which means that we aren't kind of receiving signals or things that say that we're safe. That's when it kind of translates into something that could be harmful for your health and develop into burnout. And your brain requires essentially safety signals to turn off the switch that makes you feel anxious or makes you worry about things. And what's important is that in order to have, optimal functioning of our prefrontal cortex, we have to have these safety signals. And if you know about that kind of brain activity, these are the kinds of things that allow you to make clear decisions, to regulate your emotions, to interact effectively with other people. And so you kind of need these signals in your environment that say, like, you're safe, your goals are not being blocked, your well-being is not being harmed. Otherwise, you will kind of worry and ruminate over things. And that's kind of when it becomes harder to do the things that you want to do, right? Like, we all want to make clearly thought through decisions. We want to be able to regulate our own behavior. That's what goal striving is. And we want to be able to interact with other people. And so that's kind of the point here, is that I don't like to think of resilience as this thing, you have to be more resilient or else, or it's somehow like completely your fault if you're feeling worried or anxious. It's like, no, that's exactly part of this. Being anxious and being worried because something, adverse is happening, that's normal, and that's something that is just part of the picture. We just look at all of these components in it and understand how it's working and what we can do about it. And it's almost never a fault of the person if they're feeling worried or anxious. It doesn't mean you're not resilient enough. It just means that your body's doing what it was built to do. So that's one point that I really like to make. And our final building block here is the idea of connection. And this sort of comes from self-determination theory. So we have these three core human needs: autonomy, being able to do what we want to do, how we want to do it; competence, or kind of growing and developing skills and feeling like we can gain knowledge and become more competent at something; and then relatedness is what is it all for? Are we really connected to anyone else? Are we helping? Are we, is the stuff that we're doing part of something bigger? And these are the kinds of things that if these needs are fulfilled, that's how you feel engaged in your work. That's how you feel satisfied with your life. And when we experience stress, when we experience adversity or disruption, that can block these needs from being met. And so if you think about, whatever it might be that you're going through right now, if you kind of feel like tired, you're kind of exhausted, you might not feel like you have all the motivation you normally have, or you feel like, well, I used to be able to do these things and I just it's really a lot harder for me right now. Check in with those kind of three core needs that you have. Why is it that you're doing what you're doing? Can you sort of rechart the course that you're on? Like, what are your goals and how do they connect to the bigger picture? Can you think about other people you might be able to turn to help you with this? And I think also about, obviously putting on your own mask first before helping others has an entirely different meaning now. But it's sort of like if you think, going in an airplane and they talk about the oxygen and how you want to make sure to secure your mask first before going to help anybody else. And this is the same kind of idea too, is that, you'll be able to better assist others and engage with others if you take care of that mask for yourself first. And there's a really neat tool that so the slides are in the shared files area. And so you would, I believe you'll be able to click on this link here. But basically, UC Berkeley has a gratitude challenge, and you can sign up either individually or like even as a whole group or a team or something like that. And it's a like a diary type thing to help you reflect on things you're grateful for. And there is actually a great amount of research that's been done to show that expressing gratitude can actually improve your well-being, and it has to do with those safety signals. So if you're able to think about things you're grateful for, you're kind of reminding yourself, like, I have resources, I have things that can help me. Man, I kind of am feeling a little bit more safe, or I'm feeling a little bit less stressed. So reflecting on the things that you can be grateful for can help remind yourself, like, thank you for protecting me, and I've got it from here, kind of thing. And so those are kind of the main bigger picture items from my sort of adaptive systems model of resilience, where we have first an understanding of what the system is, and then understanding of the different building blocks of resilient behavior, with a few tools built in here and there as well. And those are the slides I have for you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I also included a resilience workbook type thing as a PDF in the file file share area. And part of that is meant for you to be able to look back through these slides and kind of answer some of those questions for yourself. What are the kinds of resources that you have to help you? What does it look like when you are at your best? How do you know if you're not? And then kind of being able to build a personal resilience plan using those ideas and kind of operationalize that. Like, what kind of stressors are you facing? And how are you able to build your capacity to be resilient toward that? What can you do about it? And then how do you know that you've demonstrated resilience as a result?